Hey, welcome back to Wolf's Watch. I'm Wolf, and today we have a special guest. Grab something to write with. You're going to want to take notes. We have with us Laurel Rolls. Laurel Rolls. I'm sorry, Laurel. Jeez, I have
Everyone has trouble with
I
that. Too
are a
many R's and too many L's.
I are a professional, right? And it's like as you're watching this, you may remember Laurel from our Women in Leadership series that we did during the Great Lockdown in the very early days of Wolf's Watch. Laurel, thanks for coming back with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Jeff. I love having, this time to interact with you and your audience.
Yes, and I was loving our pre-show conversation. It's too bad that as you're watching this, too bad you couldn't have been there for that because that was just like I wanted to be writing notes like crazy while we were just getting ready for the show. Laurel was the second woman to achieve partner at Delloitte, which is a
in in,
massive,
in consulting,
massive
in the consulting arm,
in
yeah.
the consulting side. It's just a massive achievement. And Laurel, you've worked with so many companies. You have been, a serial entrepreneur yourself, and we're seeing inflation like we haven't seen an inflation cycle like this really arguably in 40 years,
Right.
since the 70s, early 80s. And you've experienced that from a business owner side as well. We were talking about that
Yeah.
when you owned a business. Could you share a little bit of your experience on what that was like?
Yeah, it was frightening. You go through all of those emotions because you've got payroll to cover, a whole lot of things that you have to be considerate of when you're in that inflationary period. And Jeff talks a lot about some of the things of business that you need to lock down in terms of your cash, et cetera, et cetera. And those are extremely, extremely important. And what I realized though is if I stayed in that fear or that uncertainty of inflation, knowing that it was here, not knowing when it was going to end, but sure that it was going to end. And in this time, it will end too. We just don't know exactly when. And so I took that opportunity to say, well, what do I need to do in order to be stronger when I come out of the other side of inflation? And that really was around how do I work with my clients and my customers in a different way. And so what it became for me was actually an opportunity for investing. And it might have been investing in some new equipment for them, investing in getting new messages out around their health, investing and creating some innovation around it. Let me do things differently. And that also included working with my staff so that they weren't all freaking out.
Yes.
Kind of
Well,
a
because it
reduce my
has a
life.
huge impact on your team
Exactly.
as well.
Exactly. So the energy that they were bringing in was rubbing off on everybody else. And of course, the clients are coming in with their own concerns, and it just becomes a cauldron because all of your employees are coming in with their own concerns for themselves. And so what I found is that when I got them actively looking beyond where they were today and looking at it from what can be, what are the possibilities, and how do we build those possibilities, getting their input as well as their buy-in and as well as their help in getting us there. And it made all the difference in the world because I was better positioned than my competitors coming out of that inflationary period to move the business forward. And that was really risky. It was kind of a scary thing to do,
Well, yeah,
investing money into inflation to create innovation.
I think we could call that counterintuitive.
Maybe,
To
maybe.
not to mention from an emotional standpoint, it's like inflation's roaring, cash is going out the door at an increasing rate.
Yep,
The tendency would be to go, okay, cash management is hugely important. It's
it is.
crucial. That can easily translate into I ain't spending a dime on anything until this is over because I need to conserve cash.
But then you come out of inflation, probably a little weaker.
Yeah.
And so now you've got to catch up. And what if you have a competitor that has used that time in inflation, used that time in a pandemic to innovate and restructure what they're doing?
Mm-hmm.
And so much of it is really understanding how you communicate within your organization. It can't be command and control. It can't be abusive, particularly because now people, through the pandemic, they understood it. They took on a different value set during the pandemic of what they were going to tolerate and not tolerate. And so we have we have people leaving in droves.
Yeah.
In our corporations, and you don't want to lose the wrong people. So there's a shift that's coming in terms of how do I build a different culture? Well, now's the time to do that, by the way. And when you do that and engage your employees, they're distracted from all the noise in their lives.
What's the key to that shift in culture? And it seems that there's a huge risk with both customers and with our teams that they're just getting burnt out, right? It's been two years of pivot, shift, respond, one crisis after another. And now we're looking at high inflation, possible recession on the horizon.
Yep.
And we need, and they went through, like you pointed out, they went through a huge shift in value perception of what was possible during the Great Lockdown. Absolutely. What's the key to having a positive culture shift at this point and really, I like what you said, keeping the people that you don't want to lose. High performance people have options.
Absolutely.
And I've watched companies go through brain drains, unintentionally, where they've made some unintentional moves that look good on paper, but the people that had options and were being actively recruited, were looking around and going, yeah, I'm not sure this is going to play out too well. I'm going over here because they keep knocking on my door.
Well, and particularly the younger generations, they think nothing of quit and go somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
And so you've got that working with you as well. And there's a lot of studies out there, Jeff, that really talk about why do people actually leave? And it isn't money.
Really?
No, money is not top on the list. People leave because they don't like their boss, or they're not getting good communication. They don't feel like part of the team. They don't feel like they're contributing. It's not in their value set. And that's really why people leave. It's a more humanistic sense. And that's the basis for shifting culture. Because when you get a culture where everyone is working in concert and working together, then there's no stopping it. And you extend that culture out into your marketplace. Because when your employees feel that tight-knit, we all are contributing to something that is great, then that rubs off on your marketplace. And so a lot of times I see corporations doing some things like, okay, well, we'll let them know we're contributing to a charity. And that's all well and good. However, if the culture inside the organization, your customer service people, your salespeople, everyone who's facing the market doesn't carry that in their voice, their energy level, how they talk to people, in their energy level of innovating for you, in their energy level of feeling comfortable that they can communicate what they're experiencing without getting fired. And so a lot of those kinds of things, sometimes when executives and managers are feeling all of those pressures, they become much more command and control. And they become much more directive. And more people don't want that. They want to know that they've contributed. They want to know that they've advanced a value set and a mission that everyone is rallying around. And now is the time to set that in place. Because as we do that, we're going to rule the world. There is so much power in that. And that's what I think of in terms of culture. The culture drives everything that you do and the decisions you make. And it comes back. I've often said, when things are awry, go back to the foundational elements. And I always use that even in my systems work when I was developing and deploying large-scale information systems, get back to the basics. And it's the same thing with people. You've got to get back to the basics in culture and get very people-driven.
But how do I just my own personal experience with teams, especially in bigger corporations, the bigger the organization, the more of a challenge it seems
Oh,
it
yes.
becomes. I know for
Yes.
me, because big organizations I found aren't really my gift. That's a whole nother story for another time.
I've
Because
been
there's a
in
lot of
big
things.
and small and consulting and coaching and, in a lot of different places.
Yeah. Yes. And the thing is, though, how being able to really understand how to connect with the people that I'm working with, especially when starting to scale teams, and making sure getting all that alignment to happen with culture. What are the got some
Well,
insights you can share on how to be more effective at that?
absolutely. And let me start with some of the grounding that I have. And I've got a very broad base of education in coaching and coaching type things, but they're different. It's across the board. And here's what I came down to is that if we get to an individuals and understand not only our own, which a lot of assessment systems tell you about yourself in a lot of different aspects. But what I found in some of my avenues of work is that when we get to our core values of who we are, and I call them the intrinsic values, not the ones that our head tells us, but it's the intrinsic values of who we are, and get down to that basic level. And we understand what that is. And then we understand how someone else's values play into their own lives and how they work. And you can leverage that. Then you've got a really, really good equation. So in all of my years of traipsing through all kinds of jobs, consulting jobs, coaching jobs, executive jobs, all of that, what I've come down to is if you center on what someone's values are and they begin to understand the values of others, then you start bridging that gap. And when I work with teams, they come together distrustfully, right? And what you want to do is get
Yeah.
them to that co-creative state. So as you're looking at inflation and you want to build the teams, you have to get them past that distrust and into a place where they're co-creative and just flowing and zooming and, very, very powerful at that state. But they have to begin to understand each other's values and how to communicate into those values and what brings people to the table. You can look at all kinds of characteristics that come out of a lot of assessment systems, and I've been through them all. But the ones that really helped to focus me was around values.
That's interesting, because that seems to go a lot deeper
It does.
and especially, I have to admit, company mission statements and vision statements are a issue for me, because most of them aren't worth the paper. I'm sorry, most of them aren't worth the paper they're written on.
Oh, I
I
so
love
agree
doing
with
the
you.
change the company name test.
Yeah,
Does
I
can you
so agree
swap
with you.
names, and does it make a difference?
I so agree with you. And further with that is usually those are done by a big consultant that comes in and helps the C-suite do it, right? And nobody in the ranks feels it. They didn't contribute to it. They don't feel it. I have a story with a company that I was with, and they did a morale survey. And the morale survey was in the pits. I mean, really in the pits. And when that happens, it's usually communication is at the top of the list, right? And so they brought in an external, they spent $8 million on an external company that came
Holy
in and
cow.
$8 million to bring in a communication program, right? And they
Yeah.
called it Power of One. Jeff, what happened is that physical mailboxes went like this.
Yeah.
And email boxes went like this. There was no way people who were dealing with the customers and trying to drive the business forward, there was no way they could either read all of that, let alone understand it. And what's the whiffum for them?
Yeah.
So they weren't engaged in it. So the company did another survey.
Oh my gosh.
And
Yeah.
it was worse.
Oh.
It was worse. So I was sitting in one of the senior execs' offices, and he was just going blah, 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 and telling me all this stuff. And I was sitting there nodding. And I didn't know what I was going to say to it, but I was listening to him. And when I get into that space of what I call flow, which is really listening and listening underneath what he's saying, what came out of my mouth was, Mike, I think I can tell you what happened. And I said, that program was talking at the employees, not engaging with the employees.
Wow. That's a huge distinction.
It is. It is. And it's
It just,
powerful when you understand that and you begin
Yeah.
to engage with the employees where they are,
Mhm.
not where you want them to be, but where they are.
Yeah. Hey, look, as you're watching this, think about that. How many times have you been in a meeting or been in a training session and the words are just bouncing off of you and you're just like going, they're just talking at me. This isn't a
Yes.
two-way street. It's not a conversation.
Yes.
They're just throwing the information out and it stays wherever it lands, which isn't where it's needed.
That's exactly right. So you have to be able to engage with the values of the person you're talking to.
Yeah.
How they see the world, how they operate within the world. And just as a very high level, the instrument that I'm using now, which is 90 seconds, I can tell you what your value set is and the order of your values.
90 seconds.
90 seconds.
Oh, man.
90 seconds. And then we can have a conversation about what that means in your own conversation stream to others.
Yeah.
And there's basically 4 places. We have the action people that look around and go, what box? Don't put me into a box. They're on the jet stream. And then we have what we call blueprints. And the blueprints are those in your company that you really need, but they're in the box. They don't even put the toe on the line of the box. It's all about duty and processes and systems and everything else. And you need them. And you want to know how to communicate with them to motivate them and keep you in your organization.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have those who are more nurturing. They're the ones that really are great in customer service. They want to go out and they want to help the clients. And you're even in the prospects, you want a little bit of nurturing with the prospects. Because you need to understand, if you're going after someone who is nurturing, they want community, they want a connection with people, they'll give you the shirt off their back. All of those kinds of characteristics, you need to understand that, because you'll talk with them, engage with them differently than if they're the guy that's on the jet stream. And so your sales process is different with them. Your customer service is different with them. And oh, by the way, when you're building teams and talking to people internally in your own staff, it's a different conversation. And then the 4th one are the knowledge guys. So nurturing the ends actually recycle the box. So they're the ones that are going to take what is and say, hey, let's do something new and different.
Yeah.
And the K's are the ones that are going to engineer the daggone thing.
Could we do something really dangerous? I mean, we didn't talk about this before as part of the pre-show, if you're willing. And I'm not sure I want to volunteer for this, but could you do a live demo?
I sure can.
Of that with, I'll offer.
You'll offer yourself
as
up?
you're watching this, you have no idea how fast my feet are thumping the floor right now.
Okay.
I don't know that I want to do this, but I got that little voice in the back of my head. The whisper's going, go for it, go for it.
Go for it, go for it, go for it. I want you to crack your code.
Yeah.
So that, that URL I sent you, click on it and crack your code.
Oh, wait a minute. Let me find that. I got it here. Okay.
All right. So do you want to share your screen and show everybody what you're doing?
I certainly can, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Let's do that. I'll walk you through it.
I've got that little voice in my head going, this is crazy town. What am I doing? No, don't reveal yourself to the audience. No one.
This is the tool I said. And guess what? It's 90 seconds. So I want you to scroll down a little bit.
Okay. They're going to be looking over here at I guess that looks like, okay, good.
Okay. 3 easy steps.
Okay.
And what you're going to do is you're going to read through each card to learn the values of each code. And what I
Okay.
want you to do, though, is look at it not from, oh, this is my value, this isn't my value, et cetera, et cetera. Look at it from a higher level and get the flavor of the entire set of values. So you're going to read through each
Okay.
card. Then you're going to sort the cards based on what you find most important to least important. So the one that you know comes out and grabs you is your most important. The one that you'd like to throw across the floor is your least important. And then the other two fit in between.
Okay.
And then submit it. And you're going to get a report that tells you about your values. And,
Okay.
and we'll take a look at that, and I'll show you some other things as well. This is just absolutely brilliant how this has been put together. So if you scroll down a little bit more, you will see 4 cards. They're in 4 colors.
Got it.
Colors don't mean anything in particular. If you scroll down a little bit more, you'll see 4 blank squares. So I want you to go through those cards, and I want you to look at them and say, okay, oh yes, number 1 is this, and put it in the number 1 slot, and then go from there. I like to do number 1 and number 4, and then put 2 and 3 in between. So you just grab it with your cursor and move it into the slot. Okay, are we timing?
Well, I'm gonna.
Audience, are we timing him?
Yeah. Well, no, I was just going because as I'm looking at this, if you don't mind, I'm going to share how I'm reacting to it. I see all 4 of these and go, wow, you know what? There's bits of me on every one of these.
That's true. There's bits of you in every one, but one will grab you.
And that one resonates the most.
Absolutely.
And I'm looking for what, I was listening to what you were saying, so I'm focusing on staying out of the headspace with that. Well, what resonates? What feels?
That's exactly right.
And that's the flow and the feeling of it.
Yep, that's what you need to do. And I already have an idea of what you are.
Wow. See, now this is where I'm going, well, yeah. And it's like the head's arguing with the heart.
Yeah. Okay.
What is it really?
Get the committee out of your head.
Oh, but they chatter so loudly.
Okay. There you are. You're an AKNB.
And I really struggle with that knowledge over nurturing.
Well, and what that may be is that they're very close together.
They are.
So we have another.
At the end of the day, I would swap those 2, though.
Well, go ahead and swap them. What really gives you the greatest? There you go. That's how easy it is. Because
as much as I value, by behavior, the knowledge thing could arguably replace action.
Now, let me ask you.
I love deep dives on information. I'm a recovering engineer, the scientific process and all of that. But at the heart of it, I think this is more accurate in where I really come from emotionally.
Okay. And so knowing this and looking at the values from an action standpoint, that's really what you value. And you've got languaging that goes along with that, and your whole, and I've known you as an action person. That's what I would have guessed. So getting out there and making things happen and so on. How would you talk to a blueprint? Because you are the one, I don't see a box. Let me do whatever I want. You want freedom, right? You want flexibility. You're out there, sustainability.
Yeah. Or if there is a box here, let me get my box cutter out.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll solve the box really quickly. Now let's move on.
You've got that. And then blueprint people. So you've got to have blueprints within your organization.
Yeah.
If you talk to them from that standpoint, you're just not going to connect with them. It's going to be one of these. So how do you understand someone who is blueprint first? And how do you engage them, whether it's a customer to buy or customer service when you're trying to solve a problem? Okay. Or within your own team when you're trying to drive productivity and get people engaged. Now tell me, how would you engage the blueprint? How would you talk with them?
I would ask them for their what I would stop tripping over my own tongue and just approach them and go, hey, I need your help with something. What are your
There,
thoughts on this? What do
there
they
you
know? Because if they're blueprint, well, both blueprint and knowledge, I would tend to want to lead with, hey, I need to seek your advice and counsel.
Yes. And blueprints look at the big picture. Now, the
Oh,
other thing that you need to understand is an action doesn't care if they're late, right? It's no big deal.
yeah,
Yeah, I got caught in traffic. A blueprint says 20 minutes was late, 20 minutes early was late.
yeah, right,
And
right.
so I know of someone, in fact, the woman who put this whole mechanism in place, this whole methodology, she lost a huge financial services deal because her customer was a blueprint. She was an
Mm,
action, and she was coming to his office for him to sign the paperwork. And she
yeah.
was going to get a huge commission out of it. And he said, Sherry, you were late, but I communicated with you. Sherry, you were late. And if you treat me this way before you have my money, how are you going to treat me after you have my
Oh,
money? So our salespeople need to understand this and be able to know how to communicate with those who are not like ourselves. And that doesn't mean going into their office and saying, oh, you like football, right? That's a very surface level. This is down to where people make their decisions and how they make their decisions.
well, if just thinking about what the story you just told, even if I walk into someone's office and I see, oh, they like football or motorcycles is something that always gets my attention, I would still derail the conversation about
Uh-huh.
something that we both have in common as a like and a passion,
Uh-huh.
because we're coming at it from such two different angles. We're having such,
Right.
we talk about it so differently.
That's right. That's exactly right. But when it
Oh,
comes down to creating the deal, when it
mm-hmm.
comes down to getting along with your spouse, when it comes down to motivate your children, and by the way, there's incredible stories when you put it into your life. And when it comes down to motivating your staff and getting them to perform well, you've got to know this.
Yeah.
And most don't. Most communicate from their true values. And actions will, blueprint will just say, no, thank you, when an action behaves that way.
That's powerful.
I did this with someone, and he ended up with as an action knowledge. Well, we call those AK-47s. Get out of my way, and I know everything, and you know nothing. Right? That's probably not a good political thing to say these days, but at any rate, they do. They come across as, I know everything. Get out of my way. Right? And he
Right,
was
right.
telling me a story about how when he, in a networking environment, he he comes up with to somebody whose knowledge, and he politely takes himself out of that arena and introduces them to someone else. And I paused when he told me that, and I said, you just gave away 25% of your prospects.
Yeah.
Right? Because he didn't know how, even though he was K, he was K from the standpoint of, I know everything. You can't tell me anything. Instead of engaging that K in a conversation about what's important to them and being able to close them within their structure of values. It was extraordinary. Oh, I could go on and tell you all kinds of stories, but it's
Just real
about
quick. I'm watching the clock, and I had
yes.
promised 30 minutes. Is it okay if
Yep.
we go a couple minutes over, about another 5-10 minutes?
Oh, sure. I'm happy
As you're
to.
watching this, stay with us. We're only going to go another 5-10 at the most, and I don't want to stop this conversation too early, because this is great stuff. This is so powerful.
So if you go down further, you'll put in, you may not want to do that now, but you'll put in your contact information, and then you'll hit submit.
Okay.
And you will get a report that tells you about your code, and I'll get a report that tells you about your code.
Okay.
And so from a salesperson standpoint or a manager standpoint, it's really great to understand the people you're working with. And then we can have further conversation on it.
And I'm filling this out off camera here while we're talking. Now I have an inquiring mind, and I need to know.
there. It's an amazing new tool that I took on, and it's based in artificial intelligence, by the way. The people
Okay.
who did the Jeopardy challenge they did Watson for IBM.
Yeah.
They're on the board and they're on the technical team
Wow.
behind all of this.
That is some amazing talent.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I liked it. There's 3 reasons why I liked it. It was really putting it into the realm of artificial intelligence that is going to become extremely relevant in our businesses today. And we can have another session that talks about that. And it was about values, which is intrinsic to who we are and how we make decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And the kicker was it helps me to understand my audience so I can speak to them in their value set. And that was the game changer for me. And should be for every executive, every salesperson, every parent, every spouse.
Absolutely. And I want to, is it okay if I share that link with our audience?
Sure. That would be fantastic.
So here, this is the link as you're watching this. This is where we went, and I'll put this in the notes.
Okay.
As well. So if you're watching this on the replay, you can go to the description of this episode, and there will be a link there. You can click on this link. It'll be active for you. Wow. That's some powerful stuff.
It's incredible learning, and it's so extraordinarily powerful in building teams and communicating in engaging with others rather than talking at others.
Do people learn to adapt, or does that change over time as we grow? Because I've heard the saying, and I've experienced this myself. Wisdom doesn't necessarily come with age. Sometimes age just comes alone. And I've been guilty of that at different seasons in life where I'm going, I'm getting older and I'm not bringing any wisdom with me. So I better stop.
There are life events. Aging, I call a life event.
Yeah.
And it's with us from the day we're born, right? Mm-hmm. We are aging constantly from the day we're born to the day we leave this earth. And we can't escape that. And our experiences are what we bring along. And that creates our wisdom. So our wisdom comes out of everything that we've experienced in life. And I know there's times with young people we want to go, please, you don't understand.
I know it took me 10 years to learn this, but you need to learn it in the next 30 seconds or I'm going to have an issue with you.
And they're not
I've never done that with someone.
Because they have to go through their own experiences.
Yeah.
But it's all about engaging people with where they are and what they believe and making sure that which is missing in our world today, that they're willing to hear and engage and look at the possibilities. And so that's why I go back to the basics of values. And yes, they can shift because major things can happen. I just worked with a client this morning, and she built a $1 million business in direct sales.
Okay.
And 28,000 people in her downline.
Wow.
And so she was in the top echelon of her particular business. And then she had a major life event. She lost her 21-year-old son.
Oh.
Her only son. And he was coming out of trade school. He was on his way to his first day on his first job. And car versus truck. And he was gone. And so that was a major event in her life. And I think she was one of those people that was driving money, 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 money. And we talked about that this morning or this afternoon. And she said, Laurel, my values have shifted. And my values are, yes, money is there. It's not my driver. It's connecting with people and helping them to expand on their own world. So it really came down to moving herself to building her business around helping others to succeed. And it's starting with your health and moving that to wealth, because this happens to be one of the direct sales organizations that is part of health, right? And all of
Okay.
her life has been part of health. And so health to wealth. And I said, well, we have a gap in there. And the gap is that people try to get into these organizations and create that wealth and improve their health. But there's a gap in between, and it's the mindset that people bring to it. And it is the skill sets around building the business that are missing in between. And so she's going to use some of the values and this methodology to fill in that blank, so that it really helps people to go from this to this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm really proud of her for moving back into it. And it's only been 8 months. And so she's really moving back into that to fill her life and get out there and help people. And so, yeah, sometimes our values do shift a little bit. She started out as action driven and nurturing behind. And now the nurturing is really, action is still there. Let me tell you, she's the person that gets up and goes. But her value set is not about the latest fashion. It's not about the biggest, best car. It's not about jet setting everywhere. It's really about using her action in order to help. So yes, context changes. And I found it interesting that you put knowledge in the third place, because that's stress. So where do you go when you feel stress? Do you go to learning something?
Sure do.
There you go.
That validates the heck out of that.
Yep.
To the extent that I have to watch that.
That you
Because
have to watch
I can spend too much time in stressful situations.
Well,
I can dive into that. I've learned to be mindful that
yes.
that I have a boundary. Go, okay, this is the knowledge that I need to add. Now let's set that deeper dive aside,
Right.
so that I can return back to action. Otherwise, it ends up being a rabbit trail.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And understanding how that fits in is what's important. But more important, it's the people around you, particularly in an organization where you're trying to get other people to perform and to be a part of the organization, to go from distrust to co-creative. They need to understand others. And this is a mechanism, a tool, particularly with the artificial intelligence behind it, that helps you to do that.
Well, and that is, I can't imagine that being more on point from a leadership standpoint, given everything that's going on externally right now.
Yeah. Oh, now.
Right? I mean, we've had 2 years of total chaos. Now we're moving into probably at least 2 more years of a different type of total chaos in the external environment.
Right. And it's burning people out, and it's giving people ulcers. And what I'm saying is, it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to. Now is the time to make this shift to what I call the more humanistic style, and engage people into solving the problems with you. Then they have ownership and they have buy-in. And that's what happens with mission statements. The employees don't have ownership or buy-in.
Yep.
So when they have ownership and buy-in, then it makes all the difference in the world. And so my mantra now is make people matter.
I like that. Make people matter. That is a powerful note too. I'm watching the clock. I promised you no more than 10 minutes over. And I want to ask one final question.
Yes.
Before we go.
Yes.
You brought so much. I love that. Make people matter. What are you working on next, and how can people be part of that?
What I'm working on now is helping people to get educated around how to make people matter. And it's from multiple avenues. The first one is using this technology of understanding, you see the book behind me, Why They Buy. That was written by the woman who actually has created all of this platform that you just went through. And so I'm very dedicated to, in fact, their mantra is make people matter. And so I'm very dedicated to helping senior executives, to CEOs, to their staffs, and so on, to really know how to drive the business through making people matter. And I've got training, I've got workshops, we've got masterminds. There's all different ways of doing that. And even coming into companies and helping them to build a new and different culture, or helping them to really restructure and revamp their customer service organizations so they're ready for the influx of business as we get out of recession.
Mm-hmm.
Helping salespeople to really capture, 400% of their business instead of just 100%, because they're speaking simply from their code. And I've been in corporate America, and this really feels, all right, I'm going to get a little nurturing on you. It fills my heart.
Okay.
To be able to help companies to get to that next level and people to get to that next level. And so connect with me at laurelrolls.com. Crack your code and I'll connect with you. Trust me.
Yes, indeed. And I can testify to that.
And we'll get that conversation going.
Yeah. I like that. Laurel, thank you so much for being with us today. We have to do this again. We just barely scratched the surface.
Yeah. And thank you so much, Jeff. And I'm just honored that you called me back. So, and trust me to bring some wisdom and help to your audience. Thank you.
And as you're watching this, thank you for being part of Wolf's Watch. This is 21st Century Television, live and interactive. This is a two-way street. As you're watching a replay, got questions, put them in the comments. We watch that and we'll make sure that we get your questions answered. If you got a question for Laurel, we'll make sure she gets the question, or even better, you can reach out to her directly at laurelrolls.com. You can see it here in the
right
lower third of the ticker that's going across the bottom of the screen.
Please reference where you heard about me.
Yes. So she's got some context for the conversation, because context is very important.
Yep.
Laurel, thanks again. And thank you for watching, and we will see you on the trail.
Hey.